to there we go. Maybe we'll make a start. It's it's 2 minutes past 6, so we should probably make a start. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining this call this evening. I'm so sorry that we can't meet on campus again as a General Council, but hopefully very soon. To begin this evening's meeting, it's not usually my role to be in front of you, but tonight I'm here at the beginning because it's my very real pleasure to introduce the General Council to your new chair and our new Chancellor, Dame Catherine Granger, who was elected by you all last year. And as you know, not only is Dame Catherine Britain's most decorated female Olympian, but she's the first woman to be elected as Chancellor of this university. Catherine Granger is, of course, a multiple graduate in law from the University of Edinburgh at the bachelor level. She holds a master's degree from Glasgow and a PhD in law from King's College London. And of course, she's also an honorary graduate of our university and previously served as Chancellor of Oxford Brookes University. And later this week, as we were saying a moment ago, I'm really looking forward to welcoming our new Chancellor on campus for the first time. But I'm delighted that she's convening this meeting today. And on that note, I'm going to invite Catherine to assume the chair of the General Council. Catherine.
Thanks very much, Principal, and good evening to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be chairing this as Chancellor, and it's one of my, although I've been Chancellor officially for about a year now, I feel it's still one of my first early duties because of the frustration of not being able to be, first of all, in Glasgow, or second of all, being anywhere really right now. So I know we're all on Zoom, and I know we'd all prefer to be doing this in person, but at least the power of technology does mean that we can join from anywhere and at any time. So hopefully this has mean that people can join tonight and enjoy the evening and the information we'll be hearing. It's just a massive pleasure. Well, I've got a second to say it was such a privilege to be asked to become Chancellor of Glasgow. Glasgow, I think, is one of the most incredible cities in the world, and I can share my bias because I was born and bred there and lived there for the first 17 years of my life. So I know firsthand how fabulous it is and how great the people are, and that's not just because I'm a Glaswegian. But as Anton said, I came back and studied my master's there, and very, very happy memories. So it's just an absolute thrill. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to come back in this role. So it really is a wonderful role to be in, and I know I follow in very big footsteps after Ken Calman being on before me. So I will be doing everything I can to live up to the great standards previous Chancellor has set. And at one point might hopefully see you all in person rather than on a screen, which I would very much look forward to. But I think for this evening, that's plenty from me. I'm going to ask the Principal to come back in to give his address.
Well, thank you, Chancellor. And I'm going to try sharing my screen, which is always a difficult moment. Let me try and see whether I can do this. Oh, where is it? Let me just check. Some reason it doesn't seem to be, oops. Oh, here we are. I think we are here. And if I can move it onto the General Council. Yeah, I think this is it. Right, with a bit of luck. Hope you can all see this. Okay, well, let me begin. It's a real pleasure to be able to provide an update on the university's state of play, I should say, as I do at every General Council half-yearly meeting. Of course, as the Chancellor said, we are in very strange times. We're now more than a year into the pandemic and all the upheaval that this has entailed. And we are looking hopefully at some brighter days ahead at the moment with the vaccine rollout working pretty well, and some of the indications on the impact it's having on suppressing this third wave that we are currently seem to be getting into Some of the impacts are being suppressed by the vaccine, so our biomedical experts are telling us. So hopefully the theme of recovery is the theme of our next year together. Without seeking to minimize the challenges we continue to face, I'm going to give you a reasonably upbeat report today. Hopefully that'll become clear, not only in terms of our response to COVID-19, but also on how we fared in terms of our overall financial position and in terms of the progress that we've made on our campus development program and our plans for the period ahead. But I want to stress one thing at the start. All of this has only been possible because of the absolutely exceptional efforts of our colleagues, of our staff over the last year. I've said it before at General Council meetings, I'll say it again, I really have been humbled by the way colleagues have gone above and beyond and for everything that they've done and they are continuing to do on behalf of the university. There's absolutely no doubt that this pandemic has impacted on workloads. It's impacted really seriously on people's adaptability, and given everything else they've had to juggle in their home life, caring responsibilities and so on. So I really want to thank colleagues for what they've done. I also want to briefly emphasize the third bullet point here, our determination that the university exits the pandemic in as strong a position as it entered it. Because pre-COVID, we had been enjoying a really period of robust growth. International student numbers have been growing over the last few years. Our league table performance was strong and we were seeing increases in research and other income. And this was the context in which we were progressing our campus development program and broader vision for the 2020s and the 2030s. I'm pleased to say that due to the contingency measures we've put in place, thanks to the incredible efforts of all our colleagues across the university, we do find ourselves again in a strong position coming out of the pandemic, despite the unprecedented challenges of the last 12 months. Of course, there is no complacency here. None of us know exactly how the pandemic will end or how long this final phase of transition will take. But I think the foundations we've put in place have stood up to intense scrutiny over the last year, and they've enabled us to make progress towards our wider strategic goals and our development plans. Let me just move this on. I want to talk a bit about what we've done to safeguard our students and staff. Whilst our response has matured over the last 12 months, clearly as restrictions and regulations have changed, our first priority has always remained the same, ensuring the safety and well-being of our student and staff community. When we met last year, I discussed the various measures we've been putting in place to support our students, including the over £3 million we've distributed via our University Hardship Fund, our laptop loan scheme, and our targeted support for our most vulnerable students. And in addition, as you know, as I said to you last time we met, we agreed a rent rebate scheme for those in residences unable to stay in their accommodation, and we stepped up our well-being and mental health provision in response to increased demand. And that seems to have gone reasonably well, although I won't begin to pretend that for students this was anything like a normal year, and we mustn't forget that. We know just how tough a year it's been for our students. We continue to look at innovative ways in which, as we go into next year, we can enhance the student experience. We've received welcome news this week that the Scottish Government is issuing further funds for the sector to support students over the summer, because many of them are unable to get jobs as they would normally this time of year in areas like hospitality and tourism, which have been badly hit. And this will be incorporated into our hardship fund. Our online teaching, our online lectures have functioned well. The flexibility has been positively received, although we also know that students are also very keen to return to small group face-to-face teaching. And all these factors are being worked through as we finalize our planning over the next few weeks for the next academic year. I'm going to speak a bit more about Project Aurora, which is a project we launched to look at what we do in the next academic year and to support the return to on-campus teaching. Before I do that, however, I just want to say a bit about the work which some of our colleagues have done to support the fight against COVID-19. I had a section on this last time I presented to the General Council, And I think it's really important to reflect on some of the really remarkable achievements of the university and the work that colleagues have done in the fight against COVID-19. Our MRC, University of Glasgow Centre for Virus Research, has of course played a crucial role during the pandemic. They've worked with colleagues across the UK on various activities, including particularly identifying and tracking the sequencing of new variants and understanding how the virus is spreading. The tracking of new variants is something the MRC's CVR is doing particularly. The CVR is also leading the establishment of a project called CRUSH, a COVID-19 drug screening and resistance hub in Scotland. This is a groundbreaking project. It's received £2.5 million to establish a national resource, which will be initially dedicated to supporting and accelerating vital COVID-19 antiviral innovation drugs translation. This is an area that has been less successful so far in fighting COVID, the deployment of antivirals. And indeed, the CVR's director, Professor Massimo Palmarini, received an honorary OBE for services to public health just last week. Then there's our Lighthouse Lab, which is one of the UK's main labs to test for COVID-19. It's the largest diagnostic facility in Scotland. Recently, it reached a very significant milestone. It's now processed over 12 million PCR tests. And that's a phenomenal achievement in supporting the country's national COVID testing effort. Establishing this lab was a really big collective effort. We're the only Lighthouse Lab that's actually run by a university. All of the other ones in the UK, I think I'm right in saying, are largely run by private consortia. We are one that's run together with drug discovery service company BioAscent, the University of Dundee, the Scottish Government, and the Cancer Research UK Beatson Institute, but it's run by the University of Glasgow. And we had more than 800 volunteers who came forward, people who were working in our life sciences labs with no background into COVID testing, came to be trained and staffing this lab on a 24/7 basis. They're of course experienced scientists, and I think that helped to get the lab up and running. And there are also plans for the lab to continue with diagnostic capacity for Scotland post-COVID. Similarly to Professor Palmarini, Professor Mike Barrett, who has been leading much of the work at the Lighthouse Lab, received an OBE for services to the NHS in the Queen's Birthday Honours List. And as well as CVR and Lighthouse Labs, colleagues have been significantly involved with the Oxford vaccine trial. They're now leading the Glasgow arm of the new COV Boost study. You may have heard in the Today programme this morning. How will booster vaccinations work? Well, it's run by a consortium of Southampton, Glasgow, and one or two other universities. And countless other researchers in Glasgow have also been leading global studies into long COVID, and that's just beginning now, looking at how vaccinations work on the most vulnerable in society, those who have cancer, or those who have other serious diseases, autoimmune diseases. So a lot of work going on in this whole area, which is really quite remarkable. Let me say something about financial and operational planning, because as you may remember from my update last year we put in quite a lot of cost controls to the university, because none of us knew how this was going to play out. None of us knew whether students were going to be able to travel to the university from abroad. And of course, a large amount of our revenues are around 180 million or so are dependent on international students. So we developed various scenarios. We made sure that the only expenditure that was authorized was that for critically important staffing that was vital to be maintained. We also had different entry points for international recruitment last year, particularly postgraduate recruitment, with starts in September, November, and January. It wasn't a small task. Again, we relied a lot on the goodwill of our colleagues, because to have more than one start in a postgraduate cohort is actually a really difficult thing. It means you're doing multiple teaching throughout the year. But in a year like no other, it's been fantastic that our recruitment has been not only robust, but actually we actually exceeded the growth that we were anticipating pre-pandemic. So I think it's a fantastic outcome from Glasgow. It's meant that we've had a really good outcome in financial terms this year. And it's also meant that we've been able to release all those posts that were in the pipeline. We've actually grown our employment over this period, and we are planning to continue to grow despite the impact of COVID. The one area financially where we have been hit is simply because of the fact that obviously our catering facilities haven't been able to operate as normal. So our residences in catering have been hit financially a bit. We have had to also reduce our spend on research because initially, with the restrictions that we faced by government, we were only able during the first lockdown to maintain biomedical research. And indeed, even now, although all research has resumed, all research labs have resumed, we have restrictions in distancing, which means they're not as efficient as they would normally be. So our research activity has not returned to where it was, and we are pressing government hard to try and to return to normal distancing within labs, partly because most of these labs involve our colleagues using PPE or other protective equipment. So actually, there hasn't been a case of transmission as far as I'm aware on campus. So, and there have been other impacts, of course, of COVID on research, such as the impact on medical charities, as many of you will have read in the press. You may also have seen the reductions in spending that government has made on development assistance, overseas development assistance, and some of that has impacted on our research. But as we exit restrictions, our Vice Principal for Research, Chris Pearce, is not only developed a plan to revitalize our research activity, but we're planning to spend something in the region of 20 million over the next couple of years to really help our colleagues with the resumption of their research. I mentioned Project Aurora. I've asked Frank Coton, who's Vice Principal for Academic Planning and Technological Innovation, we're running a project group called Project Aurora to coordinate our planning activities in advance of September. And it's not easy because none of us know what the restrictions will be in September. Even now, at the end of June, we're still having a dialogue with government on what will be. Of course, there will be different scenarios, and we're not expecting government to tell us exactly what will happen. We're expecting, however, them to tell us what might happen on the different scenarios, and even that's been quite tricky at the moment. So we are working closely with Scottish Government on that. So Frank and the team are looking at the scope of our activities on campus, our approach to timetabling during what across the cycle. And at the moment, our thinking is that we will. Have a single intake in September. We will not have multiple intakes. So we'll have an intake in September for those courses that are at the master's level, and then we have some January intakes, but those are not duplications. Those are ones that would normally have happened in January anyway. And of course, as part of the return to campus, Project Aurora will also be providing clear and regular communications to staff and students. At the moment, what we're doing, we're thinking pretty much about keeping a lot of our large teaching online. So very large lecture theatres, we think it's unlikely we'll be allowed to have operating normally. So we will concentrate particularly on small group teaching and putting our teaching resources there. But again, we're not predetermining that. We'll see how things emerge. Our campus development program, I'm delighted to say, has been progressing really well. It was disrupted during the first lockdown when construction activity stopped. And I must confess at the time, as I shared with you last year, we were a bit concerned about how this might go, but progress since that resumption has been really good. The James McEwan Smith Learning Hub is now complete, and not only that, it's open for use. It opened quite a few weeks ago in time for the study period before the exams, and although of course we can't use the teaching labs and the big lecture theatre, it's being used very effectively by around 1,000 to 1,500 students as a study space. In fact, it's no longer being used for that. I was in there just yesterday, and of course, all but our postgraduate students have now finished their exams, and so actually, it's not being used. But at the time, in the height of the exam season, it was being very effectively used. I'm informed the students are actually already referring to it as the Jimmy, so it's already got a nickname as well. The JMS is the first building to be delivered through our campus development program with our Advanced Research Centre, the ARC, what was previously named the Research Hub, due to open next year. And we've also reached significant milestones in the commencement of construction on the postgraduate Todd Hub and the home for the Adam Smith Business School, and our Clara Spears building, which is the home for the Institute of Health and Wellbeing. And on Church Street, the demolition of the Gardner Institute is complete. The deconstruction of the Ponte Corvo building is due to commence imminently. And if you've been on University Avenue recently, you'll see that work progressing with the landscaping of University Place, and indeed the whole of University Avenue is progressing really, really well. So let me show you some pictures, because that's much more interesting than me droning on about this. Here is the James McCune Smith Learning Hub. Fantastic building. I have to say, if you do have an opportunity, and I hope some of you will through our development and alumni office to visit, we've already shown some of our donors around. It's a fantastic building and it will be used. Those mannequins, those wire mannequins, it's a fantastic idea. Modern sculptures, which we've been using to maintain physical distancing. But it's really nice because if you see some of the booths that the students are using, which have 2 seats, but you're only allowed to use one because of physical distancing, we have a mannequin in the other one, and the students will tend to hang scarves and hats on them so that they actually have begun to have a life of their own. It's really quite attractive. This is the artist's impression of the Clara Spears Institute of Health and Wellbeing. Again, that's progressing really well. We had the topping out of this just a week or so ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago now. It's a fantastic building. Just to remind you, we have our Institute of Health and Wellbeing, which cuts across from our Medical, Veterinary and Life Sciences College to our Social Sciences College. And it's really bringing together all those activities within that institute. It's about partnership working with external partners such as the NHS, the government, voluntary sector and industry. It's about public health, of course, but it's also about areas like the integration of health and social care. It's about global public health. So it covers a huge range of issues, and it's going to be a fantastic and welcoming location for our research and for our teaching in that area. This is what it looks like now. Just in the photograph at the bottom right, the other day, enjoyed the opportunity to toast the building, the building company that produced it, Multiplex, and which has been producing the first three buildings. And as you can see, it's the structure is well advanced now, and very soon you'll be able to see what it looks like when it's completed. We also broke the ground on the same day for the new Adam Smith Business School and Postgraduate Taught Hub. This is the artist's impression of how that will look. And again, we're looking forward to seeing that completed in due course. It's due to complete in 2022, probably going to be opening the following year. It's a fantastic facility. Of course, with the JMS providing a new facility for our undergraduate students, it's great that our postgraduate taught students, our master's students, will also have a hub of their own as well. I mentioned the ARC, the Advanced Research Centre. It's scheduled to be handed over in Q4 of this year. And again, our launch is planned for next year, probably in June 2022. To remind you, it's an interdisciplinary research building. The architects were the same as the ones who designed the Francis Crick Institute in central London near King's Cross. It will bring together world-leading researchers across our colleges. Currently, it will host about 5 themes, from creative economies and cultural transformation, to digital chemistry, to international development, to quantum and nanotechnologies, and technologies touching life, which include not only biomedical research, but also biomedical engineering. And by housing diverse teams within the same building, the ARC will expose individuals and research areas to each other. They'll introduce opportunities for cross-disciplinary working. It will house about 600 researchers, but it will not only do that. Again, at the ground floor level, and I'll show you that in a moment, in just a slide or two, it will actually be a home for other researchers who are not located there to work together. It will be a genuinely an opportunity to bring people together across the university, not only in those 5 themes. And this is the picture of the atrium, which again we can use for to highlight the work that we're doing at Glasgow, also to hold conferences in some of the public spaces underneath there. Within the ARC, in addition to those 5 themes, we also have ambitions for the university to house one of the largest virtual reality, augmented reality suites in the UK. There's been some fantastic projects happening in the university on how we use VR and AR in teaching. And like me, you probably thought, well, you can't do VR online, can you? Well, actually, what's fantastic is that our philosophers and our psychologists who've been collaborating on this project, they've been developing some techniques on how you can do VR by proxy. So even in this world of Zoom or Teams, you can actually use some of those interactive techniques of virtual reality. And it's really fantastic to see. And as you can see, it's really progressing. In fact, this picture is not an up-to-date one. It's now looking much more like the previous picture. But all in all, we really are very encouraged by the progress that we're making on our campus development. It is going well, and although it's been delayed by a few months, everybody's been delayed by a few months, we're pleased where we are. Projecting forward, I wanted to say just a few words before concluding about our involvement in COP26 this November. And as you know, COP26 is the United Nations Climate Summit, which is being held in Glasgow. We are developing a portfolio of activities around COP26, including hosting events, dedicated exhibition space and volunteering activities, some of them in the green zone, the official green zone, but some of them hosted on campus, hopefully some of them in person as well, and not simply remotely. One of our vice principals, Rachel Sanderson, is leading on the COP26 events. And it's a really huge moment for Glasgow as a city, of course, because we are determined to play our full role in proceedings, but it's a fantastic moment for the university. The conference will take place at the SEC, and of course, that's just a stone's throw away from the university. And so it will be a real opportunity for us to raise our profile during this phase. As part of this, we were doing this anyway, but as you know, dovetailing with this is, of course, our sustainability strategy. We've set ourselves a very clear goal to be carbon neutral by 2030. And that's probably amongst the Russell Group universities, that's probably the most ambitious goal I've seen. Ourselves in UCL are the 2 universities that have set ourselves a 2030 carbon neutrality goal. And we plan to do that in various stages. We plan to focus on Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And given that we want to continue to attract international students, we will probably deal with Scope 3 emissions through gold offset type projects, many of them hopefully here in the UK. We've launched Glasgow Green, our response to the climate emergency last year, our strategy in response to the climate emergency just at the end of last year. And alongside that, we also launched a new Centre for Sustainable Solutions. And that again will work across the 4 colleges, bringing together research, teaching, services, students and external partners to develop solutions to the climate crisis. And just this week, I was delighted that the university was a signatory to the Sustainable Glasgow Charter launched by the city government. Let me just, with that in mind, just on that note, I just wanted to highlight that we are continuing to commit ourselves as a civically minded university, working for the benefit of the city and its people. We are a global university, but we are also a local civically minded university. The 2 things are not in conflict. In fact, they're highly complementary. Because we have such fantastic world-changing research and such fantastic world-changing students and alumni, we can also make a huge impact on the civic fabric. And a couple of examples here of what we're doing. We're working in partnership with Scottish Enterprise and Glasgow City Council on the Glasgow Riverside Innovation District, or GRID. GRID is part of the university's work in Govan and around the Clyde side to create an inclusive innovation district and to build on the industrial legacy of the city to see our leadership in the high-tech industries of the future, like quantum technology and like precision medicine. And indeed, GRID will also incorporate, in that note, GRID will incorporate the university's new Living Lab and precision medicine campus integrated with the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. You'll recall that in June last year, we were delighted to be awarded £38 million by the UKRI Strength in Places Fund, and the Living Lab will bring together local businesses, academia, NHS, City Council, Scottish Enterprise, and the Glasgow Science Centre as partners. We're working in partnership to support the long-term economic regeneration of Govan, which is still one of the UK's most deprived areas. But the plan in the Living Lab is to deliver solutions for patients, to deliver cost savings for the NHS, to deliver new therapies, working in partnership with industry. And I'm glad to say that formally the Living Lab will be launched this summer, so you can hopefully look out for that. And the university is also launching a new learning centre this year in Govan with the charity Into University. This will provide additional educational support to young people aged between 7 and 18, and they'll support our commitment to widening access. This is a groundbreaking collaboration between the universities of Edinburgh and Glasgow. The two of us came together and said, what are we going to do for widening access in collaboration? Into University is a charity that's very present in England, but it hasn't had any basis in Scotland. So what we've decided to do is to create some new centres working with children, working with their family, and who are experiencing poverty, and really trying to emphasise the importance of education to transform young people's lives. So we're creating 3 new centres, one in Govan, one in Criller in Edinburgh, and the third one, which will hopefully be launched soon, will be in Maryhill in Glasgow as well. And I appreciate that time is running away from me, but I just wanted to highlight a few more important developments since we met. First, in recognition of our work addressing the university's historical links to slavery, we were really pleased to be named University of the Year by the Times Higher Education in November last year. For those unaware of this, this initiative on our historical links to slavery uncovered the ways in which during the 18th and 19th century the university benefited from gifts and bequests which derived from the slave trade. And in response, we developed a program of reparative justice in accordance with our colleagues at the University of West Indies to stimulate public awareness about the history of slavery and its impact across the world. Now, I know there's been a lot of discussion about historical slavery in universities. Just to highlight, we are not trying to change history here. History is history. That's what it is. What we're trying to do here is make the future a better place. So we're working with UWI on joint projects that are going to improve the lives of citizens of the Caribbean, of other places which were impacted by the slave trade, and where we can bring our expertise to bear in a positive way. It's not about us in any way changing the past, which is something that sometimes these kind of initiatives stray into. Instead, it's a much more positive thing that we're doing. We're also delighted that just this week we were also named as the Heralds Higher Education Institution of the Year, Scottish Higher Education Institution of the Year. This is the 3rd time that we've won it in 5 years across the Scottish universities. Delighted we're able to do that. They also gave us 2 awards for widening access in the School of Life Sciences and for the Lighthouse Lab. The recent league table results have also been very heartening, with the university rising 4 places to 73rd in the QS World University Rankings, and we gained 3 places in the Complete University Guide to 16th in the UK. That league table apparently is subject to some variation. They've made some mistakes, but they tell me that they've assured us it's not a big mistake, so there may be small changes in placings there. And of course, league tables aren't everything, but in an increasingly competitive space, of course, it's very important to have that recognition for everything that we do in Glasgow. And finally, we've launched a new university strategy for the next 5 years. World Changes Together, what it's called. It's about collaboration at its heart. It's about building on our previous strategy, inspiring people, changing the world. It articulates a vision to bring inspiring people together here on campus and across our partners through a shared common purpose. The strategy is based on 3 main themes. Community, it's our vision for supporting our people, our communities, our global network of partners to work together for the benefit of global society. It's about connectivity, our vision for redesigning our spaces, our digital platforms, and ways of working to catalyze collaboration, innovation, and creativity. And it's about challenges, which is our vision for embracing a challenge-led future, which will inform how we approach research, teaching, and engagement to realize our world-changing ambitions. Now, we know that the pandemic will change our operations and as we function, how we function as a university. Some of the things will go back to as they were. Some of them will never go back to as they were. The new strategy clarifies how we want to proceed, what our objectives are, and how we will adapt to that rather uncertain future. And post-Brexit, of course, we've also restated our commitments to our international partners and networks in Europe as well. We've joined the Civic University Alliance. We are part of the Guild of European Research-Intensive Universities. So we're very active on the European scene. I want to leave time for some questions. So I just want to finish with a few words on the challenges that I see on the horizon. Obviously, COVID is going to remain part of our lives, whatever happens, even if vaccines work as well as they seem to work. And so whilst we won't return to the lockdowns of the past, we can't rule anything out in terms of restrictions in the short run, so we need to be adaptable. We will continue to contingency plan, as I say, for a variety of eventualities, both in terms of our on-campus operations and our recruitment activity. We, of course, face also changes in our environment. There's a review at the moment by the Scottish Funding Council on the higher education and further education sectors in Scotland, and we will see what that brings. And there's, of course, a major spending review at UK level in the autumn, which will impact on the amount of money that goes into research at UK level. So we are looking at all of that, and announcements happening almost on a daily basis. You will have seen the announcements last night about the creation of the new Office for Science and Technology. So we have to be adaptable. But as I say, last year we've learned a lot. We didn't get every decision right, as I said to you at our last meeting. But the combination of the commitment of our staff and the processes we've put in place, I think I've seen us weather the first year of the COVID storm, and hopefully we can continue to work towards our broader long-standing ambitions. So I think I will stop there, Chancellor. I'm sorry I've gone on slightly too long, but hopefully that's been helpful. And if there are questions, very happy to answer them.
Thank you, Anton. Very thorough update, really, really helpful. And also, as you promised at the beginning, very upbeat. So I appreciate that for my first council to hear such an upbeat address. Just a few comments from me probably I mean, huge congratulations to yourself and the rest, all the colleagues across the university for the incredible work. The place we find the university in, considering the past year and a half we've all experienced. I know that's come through a lot of commitment and also compassion from everyone who's at the university. So a big thank you from me. And I think very, very positive to hear the university is in such a strong financial position, and also the campus development can continue in the way it's hoped to. I very much look forward to seeing the Jimmy in person. So lots of things to look forward to back on campus. I'd like to see if anyone's got any questions. I think the easiest thing is if people know how to just raise the little cartoon hand in reactions, or else just wave your hand to me, although I don't have you all on my screen. So let's see if anyone's got any questions for the principal. Lynn, I've got one from you. Are you happy to ask it now, Lynn Ju?
Is it time for me to speak up?
Now is perfect, thank you.
Okay, so let me lower my hand first. That's one of the commonly made mistakes. I keep my hands up. So first of all, my name is Len. I'm actually calling in from New York. So if we would have to shake hands, my arm has to be a few thousand miles long. But I'm really inspired by your presentation. So huge congratulations to Principal Anton and also Chancellor Catherine. This is outstanding achievement. One of the things caught my attention. If we look around the world, even COVID-19 is still flipping the world upside down. You know, we all think how Bitcoin takes off. We all see how AI is changing our lives day to day. But Principal Anton, those two technology was not even mentioned once, but you mentioned quantum at least 3 times, which actually is a good problem for me. You know, I would like to follow that conversation, but without me taking more time, could you add some colors or elaborate? I sense the quantum must be dear to your heart and also core to the academic mission of the university. Could you say a few more words and elaborate on that front?
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for the kind words, and great that you're able to join us from New York. Yes, very happy to see some more about quantum, but also to perhaps make you feel slightly happier that we do have a presence in other areas of technological advance as well. I mentioned quantum because it is very important to Glasgow. We are probably one of the strongest universities in the UK, particularly in the areas of sensors and imaging. We host one of the UK's 4 quantum technology hubs, in the one in sensors and imaging. We work with around 100 companies on that. And it's not just Glasgow University, of course. We lead the quantum hub, but we are joined by Strathclyde University, Edinburgh University, Imperial, Bristol, and many other universities. So it is a collaborative effort. We're looking to develop it further. We have the James Watt Nanofabrication Centre at Glasgow, which is very, very good, particularly at integration, at integrating quantum systems, essentially. And so looking at the way in which we can further enhance sensors and imaging systems. But the James Watt Nanofabrication Centre also provides devices, constructs and manufactures devices for the other UK quantum hubs, including the one based in Birmingham, the ones based in Oxford, around areas like telecommunication, computing, and others. We're working together with Edinburgh and Strathclyde on a quantum computing initiative as well. But just to reassure you, it's not just quantum. Unfortunately, I had to keep my presentation short, and I couldn't tell you about all the interdisciplinary areas. But we do have a particular strength in data science, largely in applications, I should say. I think we're particularly strong in applications, particularly in the way in which it's applied to not only life science, of course, that's at the heart of precision medicine, but it's also the way in which it's applied to social science. So we have some fantastic computational modelers at the interface between public health and social science, looking at how you use AI, how you use data science to try and inform areas like how urban systems work, how transport systems will work, how healthcare might work in an urban setting. So there's a lot of work going in that area, let me reassure you, Linda. So very happy, hopefully, if you have any more questions about the kind of research that we do here, we'd be delighted to tell you more and to put you in touch if you are interested with those scientists who are working in those areas.
Thank you, Lynn. And again, I'd like to say that again, thank you for joining us from New York. One of the benefits of Zoom meetings is we can join from all over the world. Anyone else got any questions for the principal while he's ready and waiting? I think that's a good sign that your presentation was so comprehensive, Anton. You get let off the hook now. Okay, if there's no other questions right now for the principal, I think, Elizabeth, I think we're coming to you as a convener of court for the address, if that's okay.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me all right. I hope you're enjoying dialing in to our meeting from the comfort of your own armchair or similarly comfortable location. Hopefully not as bad as mine, because those of you with very keen eyes will notice that the ceiling above me came down earlier today. So I apologize for that. And that is one of the hazards of working from home rather than being in the Senate room giving a presentation like this. But it's very nice to see you all. And I'd just like to give you a little bit of insight into the working of the University Court over the course of the last year. But before I do that, I'm going to take us to the next slide, please, and give you a little bit of the history of the University Court and the governing body of the University of Glasgow. And you'll note that we are currently in our 570th year, the university having been founded in 1451. And it wasn't perhaps until a little bit later on that the concept of a business court, or the entity, the governing body, which is, I suppose, the most senior business body for the university, came into formation, and that was in the late 1800s. You can see before that we had very strong academic bodies in the name of the Senate, which we have representatives of here today. And later on in our life, you can see that we've been, I suppose, we've evolved as a result of a variety of acts, most recently the 2016 Higher Education Governance Scotland Act. And that brought in a little bit more structure around the universities across the whole of Scotland, many of which or many items of which we had in place already, and some which we are adapting to as we go along. So the governing body, as this slide outlines, is really has a great deal of history to it, but also has a role by way of running the business of the university, and it is the entity to which the leadership and the executive group report. And I will explain in the next couple of slides a little bit about how we work as a governing body, and also partly my role within that. If I could take you to the next slide, thank you. So having given you a little bit of the history of the governing body and of the university there, you can see here roughly what our roles are as a university court in the 21st century. And overall, our role is not to intervene at all really on the academic side or the learning experience side, all of those areas being covered by the Senate. But we do have oversight of the main resources or the assets of the university, the people, organisational development, our financial resources, the physical, the built estate, but also the non-physical estate as well. It's this body which also engages with the senior executive around the strategic plan, and Anton alluded earlier to the 5-year strategic plan for the university. I often think that with a university that's been around for 570 years, our strategic plan could go for a lot longer than 5 years, and perhaps sometimes when we do try and think along the 30, 50, 100, 250, 500 year scheme, because ultimately it is the responsibility of the governing body to ensure that this entity is fit for purpose into the far distant future and not just the next 5 years, insofar as we all believe that learning and higher education have a role much beyond our strategic plan. But the strategic direction and the strategic plan are presented and discussed in collaboration with the university court and are approved by the university court, and the executive then set off and pursue it, which they've been doing very successfully, as you've heard from Anton. We're also responsible, as any board for any organisation would be, for the reputation and the values of the entity or the university in this instance, and also the experience of our stakeholders. And with that, we have our students being the most of our stakeholder group, also the employees and the staff, and all the other entities that Anton has alluded to with regard to our role as a civic university as well. We monitor by way of a group of key performance indicators that are provided by the executive that the university court has the opportunity to review, and we also ensure that we are in compliance with the statutory responsibilities that a governing body or a board would have. And we do this through a variety of different ways, and if I could just ask us to move to the next slide. The governing body, being a little bit like the board of any entity, has a variety of subcommittees, because there's no doubt about it, with the large number of individuals on the governing body, we cannot all be experts in all areas. And some of the topics that a university with this number of employees, this number of students, this number of stakeholders, both past and present, is a really very large, complex organisation and requires a number of dedicated skills. And so this slide shows you the subcommittees that report into court. So court's role is to be the overseeing generalist, but to understand that it cannot be an expert on all areas, and therefore pulls together subcommittees that will provide what I describe as being the shoulders of the governing body, that will explore and examine and engage with the leadership of the university. They will guide them, challenge them, give ideas, approve, etc., and then recommend to the governing body the major decisions that court will not delegate to those committees. Some decisions are delegated to those subcommittees of court, and some of the very large decisions are not delegated. And so in that instance, these subcommittees will review those topics and then present them to court, or recommend them to court on the back of presentations which the executive pulled together. The sharp-eyed amongst you there will notice that this slide, I think, is probably the same as you saw last year, with the exception of one additional subcommittee, which is there, the Information Policy and Strategy Committee, which effectively oversees our technology assets as a university, and also all of the issues around cyber activity, etc., all the big issues that a modern board of an entity will be considering today. Interestingly, our committees, almost all of them, have representatives from most of the stakeholders within the university. So they will have staff members on them, they'll have academic members, they will have student members, and they will have lay members on them as well. They will also have some independent members who are not lay members of court, are not members of the governing body. They are independents, but are brought on because of their expertise, for example, in human resources or in finance, etc. And that way we try to bring the richness of skills that's available to the university through the university's community and network to the benefit of the university and its future. And you can see some of that through this slide here. For some of those committees, most of those committees are chaired by lay members, which I'll come on to very shortly, but some of them are chaired by the senior leadership of the university, but all of them report back to court. So all of them have the whole governing body looking at their minutes and looking at their decisions and what they're considering. We also review those, all of those committees will review their terms of reference every year, and we are continually evolving them. As you might imagine, in the modern day, our approaches are having to evolve probably slightly more frequently than perhaps they have in the past. And all of them now have vice chairs of court, which is something which we have brought in over the course of the last few couple of years, so that again the strength of the shoulders that are supporting the court are very wide and very broad. We would like to bring greater diversity to our university court. There is no doubt about that. We have strength of some diversity, but there is definitely greater diversity we'd like to bring in, and there'll be opportunities for that in the future, which we're very much working with. If I could take us to the next slide, please. So this slide just gives you a little bit of insight into how we try to engage with the leadership. We're not trying to run the organisation, we are simply trying to make sure that it is well run. And that this well and run it effectively. One of the important
Has anyone else lost Elizabeth, or is that just me?
Yeah,
Video is
can't
also,
hear.
lagging on my
Lost.
side as well.
Yeah, I think we've lost her, I think.
Do we know if she's still in the meeting, or if we lost her completely?
I think she's
I'm back again. Sorry, I'm not sure what
Hey,
happened there.
welcome back.
Sorry. So, but brilliantly in the interim there, you've moved to the next slide. So that's perfect use of time. Thank you. So that just sort of outlines how we engage with the leadership of the university. So taking us on to the next slide, for which many thanks. This just gives you the outline of the membership of court. It's quite a large number, as you can see. It's not usual for good governance to have more than around sort of 12. Some boards have only 5 members on them as board members, but for a university you have very large boards or governing bodies, and at Glasgow it's 25. And this is simply so that we can have all the stakeholders and individuals and areas represented on the governing body that the legislation requires us to have, but also so that we have due representation from a range of different areas. One might argue that as a convener or as chair, that's quite a large group of individuals to try and convene, but I would just add that the culture and the collaborative nature of the court at the University of Glasgow, I would say, is exceptional. Everybody participates, everybody brings their ideas to the table, and nobody really comes to the table with a set of very strong views from a very specific, say, factional standpoint. Once we're all together, we are a body corporate, and we are all presenting our generalist ideas and thoughts to help take the university to the next level. I'll let you read that slide yourself, but you can see you've got there the 9 co-opted members, including the convener of court. That's my role as the chair there. We have the rector, Lady Ray, who's recently been appointed, the Chancellor's assessor, who essentially is representing Dame Catherine on our governing body, and then various representatives of the city, of the staff, of the academic body, the trade union, etc., etc. But you can see it's a very wide-ranging group, and it is brilliant because the ideas and the life experience of those individuals, both living and working within the university community and outside it, bring a freshness of insight, which is really very special, and we're very fortunate to have it at the university. Just taking us on to the next slide, I'll put a couple of names to those roles. You've clearly met Dame Catherine Granger, who's here as our Chancellor, titular head of the university, and is elected by the General Council. So that's, well, you'll be aware that's you, and presides at meetings and confers degrees and can nominate our Vice Chancellor Principal to undertake this role. Professor Anton Muscatelli, who we all know is clearly a member of court, and Lady Ray, who is our newly appointed rector, and Scotland is for a 3-year role, you'll understand that the Chancellor's role effectively runs ad infinitum, but I'll let comment on that if she chooses. And then my own role, which is for a period, I'm on my 2nd term here, you can see my name there at the bottom, as convener of court, otherwise known as chairman in other roles. And my responsibility is to make sure that the governing body is run effectively and that we have a collaborative and effective working environment. I'm also, I suppose, the primary link between the governing body and the executive leadership, the principal and the senior management group of the university. So I'll take us on to the next slide, please, if I may. And in this, you can see that we are reaching out, as I tried to describe, both through our subcommittees and also the breadth of individuals who are on the governing body, to a range of different, I suppose, university communities, the students and the staff, and there are a number of committees that are named there. The Students' Representative Council, the SRC, who give an annual call this really is covered. You can just see here as well the reference I made earlier to the Senate's role in terms of the academic world, and the University Court really does not get involved in that at all, although they do welcome and much value the communications from Senate with regard to their meetings and the issues that are of the day. I'll take us on to the next slide, please. So this slide just gives us a little bit of insight into the business that we've had this season. And you'll understand, well, as with all entities and businesses, it has been the most unusual year for everybody. And I say that in 2 respects. Firstly, in terms of ways of working that people have adapted to very rapidly. And I cannot commend enough the university, the staff, the students, the leadership of the university, to the nimbleness of the university and adapting to the world in which we have found our way. But it is extremely rare in any leader's career to find a time when they are trying to address potentially life-threatening issues that aren't just affecting the individuals who they are leading. They are potentially themselves. And that existential experience, I think, is a really unique one in terms of leadership over the course of the last year. And that has been, really something that the governing body has been clear of and really quite early on. So I would just add, as we talk about as I run to business from this session, again, the court's commendation to the leadership of the university for navigating through a really very difficult period, and also in doing that for this university, but also across the sector, across Scotland and the UK. So the main business items that we've covered this year, and we have, I suppose, have 1 or 2 additional meetings because of some of these topics, have been around how the university is responding to COVID, learning about how the scientists and the academics are working to try and help really address world issues there, what we could or we couldn't do with regard to campus development and the review of our capital plan to ensure that it remains fit for purpose and affordable, etc. Running through our strategic plan. To launch one in the middle of a pandemic where you really don't have the opportunity to meet in person is, again, really quite unusual. But the University Court has run through those. You've had a number of sessions running through the strategic plan, nudging it into shape, etc., and guiding and receiving feedback from all, I suppose, stakeholders. And then, of course, the concerns that we've all had around the student and staff health, and physical health, the effects of not having quiet places to work, or not being able to concentrate entirely on one's career with homeschooling, etc. And those items have all been within our concerns about welfare, etc., the governing body. And of course, we've had our official roles, which we have every year, our annual reports to the Scottish Funding Council, our regulator and part funder in Scotland, and also our outcome agreements in terms of what we're doing for the funding that we receive from Scottish Government. One can't forget, as you talk through all of this, that, as I mentioned earlier, the 25 odd members of the governing body are individuals themselves. And I would just highlight that there is a real sense of concern and care for those individuals who are giving their time and thoughts to the university, many of whom have worked from home without the infrastructure of businesses around them. And I would just note that we are very conscious of that as well, and grateful to the individuals who give their time and commitment to this. If I could just take us to the next slide, please. This slide just gives us a little bit of insight into the conduct of court business, and I suppose the codes that govern us. We are clearly governed by the code of good higher education governance, which actually comes out of the committee rather than the Higher Education Governance Act, so to speak. And we're also, I suppose, governed to a degree by the Committee of University Chairs Code of Governance as well, which we have an eye to as well. This body, the Committee of Scottish University Chairs, basically is the representative entity, I suppose. It simply is all coming together of all the chairs across all of the Scottish universities. And we meet twice a year conventionally, although in the last year we probably met probably 8 or 12 times, something like that. For the last couple of years, I've been the chairman of the Committee of Scottish University Chairs, and the role will rotate on next year. And I have to thank our university secretariat and our university secretary, David Duncan, and our clerk to the court, Amber Higgins, for the time that they've given to the Committee of Scottish University Chairs. So I mentioned that simply because this code of good governance is derived out of that body that I've just described. I've mentioned what our main responsibilities are, so I won't run through that again. And of course, I mentioned as well in terms of reference or standing orders for each of our court committees and our governing body. I'll just give a quick comment on recruitment of members. We have a skills matrix for the university court, and we clearly have our concerns around equality and diversity, and we review this regularly because well, as I mentioned in one court meeting, as we assess our own skills, one hopes that they are generally improving, although I'm definitely conscious in my own instance that sometimes they're deteriorating simply because you're not spending as much of your life doing perhaps some of the roles that you did in the past. So we try to keep those skills matrices up to date, and therefore we are conscious of where our skills gaps are and where and how we need to recruit for our next governing body members when the vacancies emerge. But broadly speaking, that just gives a little bit of an outline of our how we operate. To the next slide, please, if you would. This just gives you a little bit of an idea of what it's like to sit in a court meeting. I think sometimes we feel, or individuals feel, the court is a little bit distant from the world. They don't really know what happens behind those closed doors. Well, it's actually really very plain vanilla, like being a member of a committee. We clearly moved in very early as a result of the COVID restrictions, and everybody grasped that very rapidly. We cover those areas that I've already discussed. A couple of new areas that have come in the last year around the environment, COP26, the heritage of the university and its buildings, the built assets, etc., and how we can help the university use these assets to its biggest advantage. And you can just see there, I won't run through it, but some of the main agenda items, many of which I've actually already referred to during the course of the conversation. We also have an energy day and, of course, an induction and training session, which happened at the beginning of the academic year, so in September each year. And that's an incredibly insightful day. That sort of wraps up my outline of the governing body and the court experience of the court year, and also individual. If and I'll let you choose. To have many thanks for listening.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Again, very thorough presentation and so much information to take on, but it's so interesting to hear the court's work. My thank you as well for all the work you do. Being a chair myself, having to regularly chair a meeting of 25, I'm very impressed by, and being chair of chairs, I'm even more impressed by. So well done for that. Has anyone got any questions for Elizabeth on the work that's been done by the court? Quiet tonight. Okay. I think that means Elizabeth probably answered all our questions in advance. Okay, well, there's nothing more. I'm going to move us on. Next item on the agenda is just, oh, hang on, I've got a hand. Tim, can I come to you?
Hi, everyone. I actually was a member of the court when I was student president a very long time ago, so I I guess I can speak with some limited authority on what it does. And but I just wanted to ask about the question of mental health that you talked about, and this may have been a more appropriate question for the principal, but I just wanted to ask on two levels. There's obviously been significant focus in the media about the mental health impact on young people and students who are kind of studying remotely, and I wondered if that's a matter that has been kind of part of the conversations at the court. And then I wanted to ask about the mental health of staff in terms of the ways in which the court has been discussing issues around staff working from home and the challenges therein. And you know, understandably, the court's meetings itself have moved online. But yeah, it would be interesting to kind of know more about how the university at kind of at those two levels is dealing with those questions around health and well-being, and how we continue to find ways to re-engage from this pandemic. We can to think about how we can continue to connect in different ways and be more mindful of that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. A really good question. Elizabeth, do you want to come to you first related to the core, and then maybe the principal wants to talk more generally about the university?
Why don't I do that? Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, and a very prescient one, because actually you picked on the point that I mentioned earlier, which is that some of these are very existential issues, because we talk about it with regard to students and staff, but one must always remember when one's talking about any human issues, the individuals in a room in a court may also have suffered similar experiences, and one discusses these issues with great concern and sensitivity, and that is worth noting. So it's very much been a topic of our concern, and actually so much so I asked Professor Pamela Gillies, who is the Principal and Vice Chancellor of Glasgow Caledonian University, to speak to the Committee of Scottish University Chairs on this topic, which she did actually at the end of last year. It was originally timed to be for our meeting in April, but obviously in lockdown it was then postponed. So we had a series of discussions on that topic with her. We have discussed it in the court. We've had so I ought to explain, when we have our court meetings, we have the main board meeting, so to speak, but before that we often have special presentations on topics that the court has asked to be presented to the court. And we've had a presentation on that topic from individuals from the university in that space. And we have also I have dialed in, actually, dare I say it, to start a staff and student session on this very topic, where ideas and thoughts and guidelines were being shared about how to help others, but also help oneself, given the current environment. So it is a very big topic of the day. I can elaborate further, but I think probably the principal, since this sits more in the executive world, maybe better to do so. So may I invite Anton to comment? Go ahead, Anton.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. And Tim, good to see you, and thank you for that really important question. You're absolutely right. And I think one of the things the pandemic has shown is just how variable the response has been. It's really, you know, not everybody's been affected in the same way. If I look at the student population, we see a number of students who actually have performed extremely well. But on the other hand, there's others for whom the loneliness of study online has been absolutely devastating. And I know that from experience, not only in Glasgow, but across the sector. What we've tried to do is obviously to focus more resource into this area. That's been the obvious thing which we were able to do. We've invested both in terms of our own resource, but also access to professional NHS resource for the more serious cases. This is for students, and also in terms of providing a resource for staff as well. I'm actually going to ask David Duncan, who is CEO and University Secretary, but David is also mental health champion on our university's Equality and Diversity Strategy Committee, to come in, because as well as being within his area of operations, as I say, he has particular expertise and knowledge in this area as mental health champion. So David, do you want to say a bit more about the investments we've been making in this area?
Thanks, Anton. We benefited this year actually from additional money that the Scottish Government has allocated to universities to support mental health, recognising it as a key issue, as Tim pointed out. What we've done is to develop a student wellbeing strategy that covers right the way through from sort of self-help and avoiding mental health difficulties in the first place, right the way through to specialist support outside the university, and tried to avoid the kind of one-size-fits-all approach where people would say, well, if you're struggling, you have to go to counselling. So we've got more student support officers at college level that we're putting in place. And in addition to kind of professional counsellors, we've got student welfare officers who are able to triage those who come forward. And so the other thing we've done is to introduce online support for both students and staff, which can be accessed 24 hours a day for people that need it. It seems to be working reasonably well, but there's no doubt we have on the student side seen an uptick in the number of kind of serious crisis cases that the crisis team has had to support on an individual basis. And some of those cases can be really quite complicated and time consuming. On the staff side, we haven't seen so many people coming forward. We do have an employee assistance program. On the whole, you know, we have some staff reporting with anxiety and depression and the difficulties of dealing with external pressures as well as work pressures and working from home and so on. But on the whole, the numbers of who've come forward with serious mental health issues on the staff side hasn't really increased. So overall, I think with our student wellbeing strategy and the colleague wellbeing strategy that colleagues in the human resources team are working on at the moment, I think we're reasonably well placed.
Thank you all. Thanks, Tim, for the question. Like everyone's commented on, really, really important area to get right for everyone. Any other questions while we've got Elizabeth and everyone here to answer questions? Nothing else for now. I'll move us along. Next item on the agenda is just approval of the minutes held on the 2nd of June 2020. Has anyone got any changes or comments on the minutes? Raise your hands now, otherwise I will take them as approved. Okay, thank you. I'll approve the minutes. In which case we're moving swiftly on to the report of the convener of the General Council Business Committee. Stuart, I believe that's you, is that right?
It is indeed. Thank you, Chancellor. It's wonderful to be able to address you in that capacity. I found our discussion a couple of days ago very interesting and helpful. So thank you. I prepared a report which is attached as part of the papers, and that goes over the activities and matters discussed in the last year or so, by the General Council Business Committee. It's been, the GCBC is in a, I think I would describe it as in a process of transition, because historically GCBC came in, I believe in the 1950s, and they was established in the 1950s. And in those days, the university was a very different place. Student life was very different, and we didn't have a development and alumni office. It's been at one stage a bit of an anachronism, but now we're moving to have a much better engagement and more supportive role with the university. The last year has been very difficult for the university and for GCBC. We've not been able to have the number of meetings that we would normally have, and I'm hoping to reinstate the meetings of GCBC on a more programme basis, so that we would have a meeting late September, around about the first week of October, one in November. We would have the January half-yearly meeting, possibly a meeting in March, but certainly a meeting in May, and again back to the June half-yearly meeting, which this would be. Previous meetings of GCBC, the committee has agreed a number of speakers and themes that we would like to discuss and engage with. And in that way, we become a better resource for the university and for the development and alumni office. And so I would just like to end by saying a huge thank you to the members of GCBC over the last year, to welcome the new members, John Corrie, Patricia Cunningham and Alan McIntosh, and hope they enjoy the experience of being part of GCBC. And if there are any questions on any aspects of GCBC's work over the last year, I'm happy to take them.
Thanks, Stuart. I can see why you call it GCBC. It's much catchier than my long-winded way of trying to say the full title. Anyone got questions for Stuart about the GCBC? not seeing any hands. All right. Thank you, Stuart, and please
Thank you.
pass on our thanks to everyone on the committee. Okay, well, we're cracking along now. I suppose, I mean, other than closing the meeting, I'm just seeing if anyone's got any other business while we have a few moments. Anything that's not been said or people would like to question while we have a moment. Now is the moment to raise your hands or speak out. I'm not going to fill the time for the sake of it, but just this is the moment in case we haven't covered anything or you've got to come back. Thank you, Mary, for welcoming the new GCBC members. Very good point. All right, well, in that case, I will move to close the meeting. And I just want to say thank you again. From a personal point of view, thank you to everyone for the very warm welcome I've experienced from this council and from the wider university. It's been very, very special. And as we've heard throughout the evening, there's just so much going on and so much brilliant work being done. And I think I'll spend every single day being a chancellor just learning more information. So it's been a lot of learning tonight, and it's been very valuable and very useful and just very rewarding to know how much incredible work has been done over the last year and will continue to be done going forward, because I know we're certainly not out of the woods when it comes to the pandemic or the challenges ahead. But I think everyone who's spoken tonight I found it very reassuring that the university is in a very strong place and will continue to be, and is so mindful of making sure that especially the student experience can be as good as it can possibly be, because I think that's been quite extraordinary what a different experience everyone's having. I know I look back very, very, very fondly on my university time, and I feel for every student who doesn't get to have that wider experience, but I feel really pleased and proud that the university is doing everything that's possible in the restrictions we currently live in to make sure the experience is good. So thank you again from me. Oh, thank you, Emily. It was lovely to see you again. I waved to you at the start and I thought I'll wave to you again. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to be at Glasgow University on Thursday for the first time since the pandemic there in person. So if anyone's there, please come and say hi. But thank you all for your time. Thank you for joining today. I hope you found it enjoyable. Hope to see you all in person at some point. And Lynn, I think we could always come and see you in New York. I'm very up for that as well. I think we should, open our minds where we meet next. But please, most importantly, stay safe and look after yourselves and your families. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Catherine.
Great to see you, Emily.
Yeah, I think there's a slot in the diary at the end of the day. Rachel said she was getting to see you, so I'll pop along then too. And you said you wanted to see the Jimmy, so much as I'd love to see the inside of a meeting room, and I'm just people, bring comfy shoes and we can get a bit of exercise. We can go for a wander down there and see it.
I would love that. That'd be awesome.
Get a nice coffee. You get a tinderbox coffee. Was that there when you were a student?
I don't believe it. I always feel like coffee's sort of been reinvented since I was a student, because I don't think we did a lot of cups of tea, whereas now I'm like all about the coffee.
So you didn't have the money for a coffee apart from anything else. So.
I wouldn't. No, God, I can hardly do it now.
Yeah.
Totally
great.
on.
We'll treat you. Let's do that then.
Comfy shoes and a coffee. I'm going to be. I think I'm going to be there from about 10:30 on Thursday. So when when's the end? When am I seeing you? What's the end slot?
3:30, I think. So I don't know what you've got. I think you're with David and maybe Anton, and then Rachel and I are going to come over at 3:30. So as long as you've got, let us know how much time you've got.
Oh no, it'd be awesome. No, I'd love to come. Let's do that. Let's definitely do that.
Great. It's not licensed, but I mean there is always buyer's road depending on how much time you have. Yay!
Let's start the coffee. See how we go.
Yeah, excellent. Right. Well, thank you for tonight. And great to see
you.
It's
been fun. Yeah. Nice to see you. And I can't wait to see you in person.
I know. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Night night.